Hi, my name's Addie, and we're going to be doing a reading Harry Potter book, and we haven't did this at all, and it's already bookmarked somewhere.
So we're reading through Harry Potter. We started at the beginning of the year. We read 10 pages every night, and we are on Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. We're about 3/4 of the way through.
Uh-huh. And I might do some spooky dance moves, and see, I'll read the story. And maybe my dad might do some guitar in the background. Would you, Dado?
I guess.
You do the violin.
The violin? Okay.
Going, no, just do a guitar.
Ready?
Ready.
Okay. The younger Dumbledore seemed to be waiting for something, and sure enough, moments after their arrival, there was a knock on the door, and he said, "Enter." Harry let out a hastily stifled gasp. Voldemort had entered the room. His features were not those Harry had seen emerge from the great stone cauldron almost 2 years ago. They were not as snake-like. The eyes were not yet scarlet, the face not yet mask-like, and yet he was no longer handsome Tom Riddle. It was as though his features had been burned and blurred. They were waxy and oddly distorted, and the whites of the eyes now had a permanent bloody look, though the pupils were not yet the slits that Harry knew they would become. He was wearing a long black cloak, and his face was as pale as the snow glistening on his shoulders. The Dumbledore behind the desk showed no sign of surprise. Evidently this visit had been made by appointment. "Good evening, Tom," said Dumbledore easily. "Won't you sit down?" "Thank you," said Voldemort, and he took the seat to which Dumbledore had gestured, the very seat, by the looks of it, that Harry had just vacated in the present. "I heard that you had become headmaster," he said, and his voice was slightly higher and colder than it had been. "A worthy choice." "I am glad you approve," said Dumbledore, smiling. "May I offer you a drink?" "That would be welcome," said Voldemort. "I have come a long way." Dumbledore stood and swept over to the cabinet where he now kept the pensieve, but which then was full of bottles. Having handed Voldemort a goblet of wine and poured one for himself, he returned to the seat behind his desk. "So, Tom, to what do I owe the pleasure?" Voldemort did not answer at once, but merely sipped his wine. "They do not call me Tom any more," he said. "These days I am known as—" "I know what you are known as," said Dumbledore, smiling pleasantly. "But to me, I'm afraid, you will always be Tom Riddle. It is one of the irritating things about old teachers. I am afraid that they never quite forget their charge's youthful beginnings." He raised his glass as though toasting Voldemort, whose face remained expressionless. Nevertheless, Harry felt the atmosphere in the room change subtly. Dumbledore's refusal to use Voldemort's chosen name was a refusal to allow Voldemort to dictate the terms of the meeting, and Harry could tell that Voldemort took it as such. "I am surprised you have remained here so long," said Voldemort after a short pause. "I always wondered why a wizard such as yourself never wished to leave school." "Well," said Dumbledore, still smiling, "to a wizard such as myself there can be nothing more important than passing on ancient skills, helping hone young minds. If I remember correctly, you once saw the attraction of teaching too." "I still see it," said Voldemort. "I merely wondered why you, who are so often asked for advice by the ministry, and who have twice, I think, been offered the position of minister—" "3 times at the last count, actually," said Dumbledore, "but the ministry never attracted me as a career. Again, something we have in common, I think." Voldemort inclined his head, unsmiling, and took another sip of wine.
Oh, it's a little note.
"Oh, thank you."
I always give her notes while she's reading.
"Thank you very much for the love note. I love you too."
I'm gonna make that book.
Okay. Dumbledore did not break the silence that stretched between them now, but waited with a look of pleasant expectancy for Voldemort to talk first. "I have returned," he said, and after a little while, later, perhaps, than Professor Dippet expected, "but I have returned, nevertheless, to request again what he told me I was what he once told me I was too young to have. I have come to ask that you permit me to return to this castle to teach. I think you must know that I have seen and done much since I left this place. I could show and tell your students things they can gain from no other wizard." Dumbledore considered Voldemort over the top of his own goblet for a while before speaking. "Yes, I certainly do know that you have seen and done much since leaving us, he said quietly. Rumors of your doings have reached your old school, Tom. I should be sorry to believe half of them. Voldemort's expression remained impassive as he said, Greatness inspires envy, envy engenders spite, spite spawns lies. You must know this, Dumbledore. You call it greatness. What have you been doing? What you have been doing, do you? Asked Dumbledore delicately. Certainly, said Voldemort, and his eyes seemed to burn red. I have experimented. I have pushed the boundaries of magic further, perhaps, than they have ever been pushed. Of some kinds of magic, Dumbledore corrected him quietly. Of some. Of others you remain, forgive me, woefully ignorant. For the first time, Voldemort smiled. It was a taut leer, an evil thing, more threatening than a look of rage. The old argument, he said softly, but nothing I have seen in the world has supported your famous pronouncements that love is more powerful than my kind of magic, Dumbledore. Perhaps you have been looking in the wrong places, suggested Dumbledore. Well then, what better place to start my fresh researches than here at Hogwarts, said Voldemort. Will you let me return? Will you let me share my knowledge with your students? I place myself and my talents at your disposal. I am yours to command. Dumbledore raised his eyebrows. And what will become of those whom you command? What will happen to those who call themselves, or so rumor has it, the Death Eaters? Harry could tell that Voldemort had not expected Dumbledore to know this name. He saw Voldemort's eyes flash red again and the slit-like nostrils flare. My friends, he said after a moment's pause, will carry on without me, I am sure. I am glad to hear that you consider them friends, said Dumbledore. I was under the impression that they are more in the order of servants. You are mistaken, said Voldemort. Then, if I were to go to the Hogshead tonight, I would not find a group of them, not Rosier, Mulciber, Dollhoff, awaiting your return. Devoted friends indeed to travel this far with you on a snowy night, merely to wish you luck as you attempted to secure a teaching post. There could be no doubt that Dumbledore's detailed knowledge of those with whom he was traveling was even less welcome to Voldemort. However, he rallied almost at once. You are omniscient as ever, Dumbledore. Oh no, merely friendly with the local barman, said Dumbledore lightly. Now, Tom. Dumbledore set down his empty glass and drew himself up in his seat, the tips of his fingers together in a very characteristic gesture. Let us speak openly. Why have you come here tonight, surrounded by henchmen, to request a job we both know you do not want? Voldemort looked coldly surprised. A job I do not want. On the contrary, Dumbledore, I want it very much. Oh, you want to come back to Hogwarts, but you do not want to teach any more than you wanted to when you were 18. What is it you're after, Tom? Why not try an open request for once? Voldemort sneered. If you do not want to give me a job. Of course I don't, said Dumbledore, and I don't think for a moment you expected me to. Nevertheless, you came here, you asked, you must have had a purpose. Voldemort stood up. He looked less like Tom Riddle than ever, his features thick with rage. This is your final word? It is, said Dumbledore, also standing. Then we have nothing more to say to each other. No, nothing, said Dumbledore, and with a great sadness filled his face. The time is long gone when I could frighten you with a burning wardrobe and force you to make repayment for your crimes. But I wish I could, Tom. I wish I could. For a second, Harry was on the verge of shouting a pointless warning. He was sure that Voldemort's hand had twitched toward his pocket and his wand, but then the moment had passed. Voldemort had turned away, the door was closing, and he was gone. Harry felt Dumbledore's hand close over his arm again, and moments later they were standing together on almost the same spot, but there was no snow building on the window ledge, and Dumbledore's hand was blackened and dead-looking once more. Why, said Harry at once, looking up into Dumbledore's face. Why did he come back? Did you ever find out? I have ideas, said Dumbledore, but no more than that. What ideas, sir? I shall tell you, Harry, when you have retrieved that memory from Professor Slughorn, said Dumbledore. When you have that last piece of the jigsaw, everything will, I hope, be clear to both of us. Harry was still burning with curiosity, and even though Dumbledore had walked to the door and was holding it open for him, he did not move at once. Was he after the Defense Against the Dark Arts job again, sir? He didn't say. Oh, he definitely wanted the Defense Against the Dark Arts job, said Dumbledore. The aftermath of our little meeting proved that. You see, we have never been able to keep a Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher for longer than a year since I refused the post to Lord Voldemort. Here's a picture.
Wait, can I see it again?
Yeah. The Unknowable Room.
Who is that?
I think it's Hermione.
Wonder.
Yeah, it looks like it. Harry racked his brains over the next week as to how he was to persuade Slughorn to hand over the true memory, but nothing in the nature of a brain wave occurred, and he was reduced to doing what he did increasingly these days when at a loss, poring over his potions book, hoping that the prince would have scribbled something useful in a margin, as he had done so many times before. "You won't find anything in there," said Hermione firmly, late one Sunday evening. "Don't start, Hermione," said Harry. "If it hadn't been for the prince, Ron wouldn't be sitting here now." "He would have if you'd just listened to Snape in our first year," said Hermione dismissively. Harry ignored her. He had just found an incantation, Septum Sempra, scrawled in the margin above the intriguing words, "For enemies," and was itching to try it out, but he thought it best not to in front of Hermione. Instead, he surreptitiously folded down the corner of the page.
This is so funny. This looks like Daddy's little funny instrument.
It does. Oh yeah, the didgeridoo.
Yeah, so funny.
They were sitting beside the fire in the common room. The only other people awake were fellow sixth years. There had been a certain amount of excitement earlier when they had come back from dinner to find a new sign on the notice board that announced the date for their apparition test. Those who would be 17 on or before the first test date, the 21st of April, had the option of signing up for additional practice sessions, which would take place, heavily supervised, in Hogsmeade. Ron had panicked on reading this notice. He had still not managed to apparate and feared he would not be ready for the test. Hermione, who had now achieved apparition twice, was a little more confident, but Harry, who would not be 17 for another 4 months, could not take the test whether ready or not. "At least you can apparate, though," said Ron tensely. "You'll have no trouble come July." "I've only done it once," Harry reminded him. He had finally managed to disappear and rematerialize inside his hoop during their previous lesson. Having wasted a lot of time worrying aloud about apparition, Ron was now struggling to finish a viciously difficult essay for Snape that Harry and Hermione had already completed. Harry fully expected to receive low marks on this because he had disagreed with Snape on the best way to tackle Dementors, but he did not care. Slughorn's memory was the most important thing to him now. "I'm telling you, the silly prince isn't going to be able to help you with this, Harry," said Hermione more loudly. "There's only one way to force someone to do what you want, and that's the Imperious Curse, which is illegal." "Yeah, I know that, thanks," said Harry, not looking up from the book.
Can I get a chair where I
"No, sweetie, it'd be too loud." "That's why I'm looking for something different. Dumbledore says Veritaserum won't do it, but there might be something else, a potion or a spell." "You're going about it the wrong way," said Hermione. "Only you can get the memory, Dumbledore says. That must mean you can persuade Slughorn where other people can't. It's not a question of slipping him a potion. Anyone could do that." "How do you spell belligerent?" said Ron, shaking his quill very hard while staring at his parchment. "It can't be B-U-M." "No, it isn't," said Hermione, pulling Ron's essay toward her. "And augury doesn't begin O-R-G either. What kind of quill are you using?" "It's one of Fred and George's spell check ones, but I think the charm must be wearing off." "Yeah, it must," said Hermione, pointing at the title of his essay, "because we were asked how we deal with Dementors, not Dungbogs, and I don't remember you changing your name to Runil Waslib either." "Ah, no," said Ron, staring horror-struck at the parchment. "Don't say I'll have to write the whole thing out again." "It's okay, we can fix it," said Hermione, pulling the essay toward her and taking out her wand.
Say spell check, try.
"Yes,
That's funny.
spell check failed." "I love you, Hermione," said Ron, sinking back into his chair, rubbing his eyes wearily. Hermione turned faintly pink, but merely said, "Don't let Lavender hear you saying that." "I won't," said Ron into his hands, "or maybe I will, then she'll ditch me." "Why don't you ditch her if you want to finish it?" asked Harry. "You haven't ever chucked anyone, have you?" said Ron. "You and Cho just sort of fell apart." "Yeah," said Harry. "Wish that would happen with me and Lavender," said Ron gloomily, watching Hermione silently tapping each of his misspelled words with the end of her wand so that they corrected themselves on the page. "But the more I hint I want to finish it, the tighter she holds on. It's like going out with a giant squid." "There," said Hermione some 20 minutes later, handing back Ron's essay. "Thanks a million," said Ron. "Can I borrow your quill for the conclusion?" Harry, who had found nothing useful in the Half-Blood Prince's notes so far, looked around. The three of them were now the only ones left in the common room, Seamus having just gone up to bed, cursing Snake and his essay. The only sounds were the crackling of the fire and Ron scratching out one last paragraph on Dementors using Hermione's quill. Harry had just closed the Half-Blood Prince's book, yawning, when crack! Hermione let out a little shriek. Ron spilled ink all over his freshly completed essay, and Harry said, "Creature!" The house elf bowed low and addressed his own gnarled toes. Master said he wanted regular reports on what the Malfoy boy is doing, so Creature has come to give.
Thanks for watching and leave the comments down